Yeah, so greetings from Pennsylvania once again. Today is March 22nd, March 26th, not the 22nd. Yeah, and a bit of a dreary day out here in Pennsylvania. Winter has kind of made a return, at least for a couple of days here. But yeah, today's video is an update on Dents Run Gold. I filmed that video this past summer. I'll recap that story in just a little bit, but I wasn't going to film this today. Actually, I had several other plans maybe I was going to do today, but then I checked my mail today, went to the post office, and I had a letter from somebody, and they sent me an article about Dents Run Gold, about some updates on the whole lawsuit that the father and son have against the FBI concerning that gold. It's kind of an interesting story, but I'm going to find a place to sit down here and talk to you a little bit about that. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to give a recap on that story. I'm not going to tell you the whole story in detail again. I'll have that video linked down below. Then I have some new thoughts on what Dents Run Gold could have been. They're not necessarily my thoughts. There's some information I've heard from some other people. And then we'll talk about the whole FBI situation that the father and son are still facing, about the information as to what the FBI did find at that spot. Of course, the FBI claims they found nothing. And then we'll talk possibly about why the FBI is trying to keep a lid on what they found. There are potentially reasons why. Like I said, we'll talk about those things in this video. Let's go find a place to sit first, though. So like I said, I did get a letter today from a viewer. Thank you, Judy. I opened it up, and there was a newspaper article in here about Dents Run Gold. Did FBI destroy video of Civil War gold? I think that's Dennis Prada and his son. So I'll read a little bit of this to you in a bit. But I thought we'd do just a quick recap of the story in case you're new to this. But like I said, I'll put a link to the original video I made down below. And of course, if you just type in Dents Run Gold on YouTube or on Google, you'll find plenty of information as well about it. Oh, but yeah, if you remember, this story supposedly took place was 1863. About 11 or so Union soldiers were traveling from, Wheeling, West Virginia to the Mint in Philadelphia. I also heard that they were traveling to Harrisburg. There's different versions of the story, as with all things like this. And instead of taking the southern route through southern Pennsylvania, they kind of went north to avoid. They're trying to avoid, because it was a civil war, and they were trying to prevent the gold that they were taking or carrying from getting taken by southern raiders coming across the border. But they went quite up into the northern Pennsylvania, up in the Dents Run area, which is over in Elk County. I guess it'll be this way for you guys, over in Elk County, Pennsylvania. And there, for whatever reasons, they decided to bury it, and then they forgot where it was, and it's been lost ever since, until Dennis Prada and his son went looking for it. And they believe they found it with their instruments and stuff. And then, of course, the FBI got involved, and yeah, that's the general story. We'll talk about that whole FBI thing just a little bit later again. But I think if you remember the story, the FBI came, dug a big hole and claimed they found nothing, when in fact they probably did. But like I said, we'll get to that in a moment. But before we get to the whole FBI thing, I have some new thoughts on that story, because I think when I told that story initially, I mentioned I had some doubts about the accuracy of the story. Things didn't make a whole lot of sense. And when I first heard the story, I thought I kind of dismissed it, didn't really think it was true at all, until the whole FBI part came in. Because then, the FBI's like, I go out to the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, dig a big hole, and say they didn't find anything. But the whole idea of it being Civil War soldiers or Union soldiers carrying that gold and things like that just didn't make sense. Because in fact, I forget the people's names, like the captain that was in charge of that group. When they checked the records, they couldn't find his name anywhere in the records, nor the guy that was under him, officer-wise. There was no record of them being in the Union Army. And I don't know why you would only have, I think it was only like 11 or 12 soldiers. Why would you have that few soldiers guarding and transporting such a huge amount of gold? The article says there's potentially like 9 tons of gold in the ground. I forget what the original story says. I feel like it said like there's 50 bars of gold or something like that. Yeah, send like 11 troops to guard that much gold. Yeah, doesn't really make sense. And why they would go so far up into the wilderness of northern PA there. Even today, that area. When I filmed that initial video, we went to the location of Dents Run, not the exact location where the gold was dug up, but went to Dents Run. Even today, it's a remote wilderness area. So back over 150 years ago, it would have been even more so. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. But then I did some other research, and I think a viewer even mentioned to me too that perhaps there's another story, another version of that story as to what that gold is about. So perhaps it's not lost Civil War gold, but stolen Civil War gold. So there was this group called the Knights of the Golden Circle. I'm not going to go into their whole history in this video. That might be worth a whole nother video someday. A whole lot of history regarding them. It's pretty interesting. It involves lots of treasure, hidden treasure, worth like a lot of money. But make a long story short, they were hoping to create like a new country out of the southern states, all of Mexico, all of Latin America, northern South America, the Caribbean islands, kind of like the Golden Circle there, and their center would have been like in Cuba, Havana, Cuba. So yeah, they were very active during the Civil War, obviously, and amassing different gold and treasures to support that cause, the Knights of the Golden Circle. Apparently there's a lot of treasure out there that was theirs that's still lost. Of course, they were stealing stuff too. Potentially that's what this Dents run gold was. It was actually not lost Civil War gold. That the story that's being said necessarily that it was being transported by Union troops to the Mint in Philadelphia isn't necessarily the real story, that perhaps it was stolen by this group and that they were just dressed up as Union soldiers, and that was their you know, what do you call it, their cover, I guess you could say, and they were transporting this stolen gold. And maybe I don't know, maybe they just buried it up there because they knew they were being followed, or that the officials were after them and they found a place to bury it, and they never made it back to get it. They never made it back to go back and dig it up, I guess you could say. So potentially that's what I'm kind of leaning towards now. It's kind of a new side to the story, the Knights of the Golden Circle. But of course, as always, you can let me know what you think down in the comments. If you think that story fits more than just the whole lost Civil War gold versus this version, you know, stolen Civil War gold. You know, if you have different theory or different ideas of where that gold came from. Because like I said, initially when I researched this story, I wasn't really so sure there was any gold at all until I learned about the FBI. Yeah, so yeah, I kind of talked about this in that previous video, but yeah, the Pradas, Dennis and his son, their instrumentation told them that there was gold down there and a lot of it, and the FBI showed up. Actually, other people showed up before the FBI. Actually, state officials showed up earlier too and tried to dig some of it up because they had trail cams set up, so they know that the state officials showed up. But then the FBI contacted them and showed up, and the FBI used their own equipment, which is even more sophisticated than the Pradas equipment, and their equipment told them too that there was like 9 tons of gold, something that had the density of gold down in that underground there quite a bit. And so the thing is, when the FBI dug it up, or dug the hole, they confined the father and son to the car and wouldn't let them at the dig site. And then when they were done digging, they came back and said, oh, we didn't find anything, so that's too bad, end of story. So initially the father and son, I think it was his name, Kevin, Dennis Prada and his son, initially they were quite discouraged by that, but then things just didn't seem to match what the FBI was saying. So let me read some of this. Yeah, the Pradas accompanied the FBI to the site in Dents Run, but they were confined to their car while the FBI excavated. Okay. Federal officials have persistently slow-walled the duo's demands for information about the dig. This is interesting. Talk about lies and all that kind of stuff. The FBI initially claimed it had no files about the investigation at all. That's their first claim. Then, after the Justice Department ordered a more thorough review, the FBI claimed its records were exempt from public disclosure. Okay, so it just admitted, first they said they didn't have any files, then they admitted they did have files, but saying they're not for public, for the public to see. But the Pradas, they had used that, what's it called? There's a freedom of, what's that law? What's that act called? Hold on a second, let me get back to you. What's it called? The Freedom of Disclosure Law, requiring the government to reveal, files about stuff like this. I forget what it's called, but they used that. Finally, in the wake of the treasure hunters' appeal, the FBI said it had located records it could potentially turn over, but that it would take years to do so. Years to turn over records, really? That prompted the treasure hunters' Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, seeking to compel production. Yeah, the Freedom of Information Act. That's the act I was looking for. So yeah. So lies, lies, lies. Oh, we don't have any files. Oh wait, we do have files, we just can't show them to you. Oh yes, we have found more files, but it's going to take us years to show them to you. Yeah, so talk about lying. Years ago I made a video about dealing with toxic, abusive people, uh, dealing with a personal experience with a family member and the lies that they say. This individual, I remember just concerning a situation, will say, they lied to me like 3 times about the situation. The first time they said they had no idea about the situation. Second time they admitted they knew about it, but they weren't like involved. And the third time, I forget what they said the third time. Their story kept changing as you kept pressing them and finding out more information, saying that they did know about it. It's the same thing here in this article. So the FBI is indeed trying to cover something up. And why? Thing is, if you didn't find anything, why not just show? If the FBI indeed didn't find anything, why not just release the records? If the records prove that nothing was found, case closed. They're end of lawsuit, end of discussion. If the if this father and son saying there's something there, and the FBI saying there wasn't, and there wasn't anything there, then show the files, show the pictures, show the videos. Case closed. So obviously, in my opinion, they're hiding something. So like I say, if the files show there's nothing there, then show them. But that's the way it goes. If you're trying to hide something, then you're not going to show the information. So, and the article talks more about how there was some video taken. How the FBI initially said there was 17 video files. Yeah. The FBI initially said its records of the dig included 17 video files. Now the government claims there are only 4 videos. Federal officials have not explained the discrepancy. Okay, so you go from having 17 videos to only 4. So that's interesting. Also, it says there's like 1,000 photos on 2,400 pages of information. That's a lot of photos, information for not finding anything. Why would you take 1,000 pictures of not finding anything? For real? Okay, yeah. So, what are my future hopes for anything being revealed? Not too great. You're trying to get the government to admit that it wasn't lying and it didn't find anything. I don't know. The government has a history of keeping things like that secret if they want to, so I don't know that there's much hope. The government's obviously dragging its tail and even releasing this information, saying it's going to take years to do so. I think in here it said that maybe they're going to release like maybe 500 pages of information per month. I'm not sure if that's happening yet. But you kind of wonder, even if they release it, is it going to be like that heavily redacted stuff where they like take that black Sharpie marker and have a bunch of it like unreadable? Who knows? Just seems kind of weird. But is there a reason that the federal government is keeping it hidden? And honestly, there probably is. Finding large amounts of gold like that does create problems. Like I said, there are state officials looking there for it. So when I was researching the first time, there was some concern by the FBI that if the state of Pennsylvania found it, that they might try to claim it as their own. And so the FBI kind of swooped in before any of that happened and took it for themselves. Because there's a story, I forget the exact details of this, but it deals with a Spanish ship back in probably the 1700s that sank in the Caribbean Sea. I think off the coast of Venezuela. I could have that wrong. It was down there somewhere. Maybe Colombia, Venezuela, somewhere down there. Of course, full of Spanish gold and silver, and it sunk. And it's one of the biggest shipwrecks I think ever, as far as treasure stuff. But then a group of treasure hunters, or was it one individual? They found it working with, I want to say the Venezuelan government. They're working with the government. They had permission to search the area. They found the ship and the gold and all the goodies down there. So why hasn't it been brought up? This was years ago, I think. So why is it still? But the ship and all the gold is still down there. Well, why? Well, there's a reason why, and you might already know the reason why if you think about it a little bit. As soon as that much amount of gold and treasure and all that good stuff is found, all of a sudden everybody wants it. I think some kind of deal was initially worked out between the treasure hunters and the government of that country, which I think was probably Venezuela. Things changed immediately. All of a sudden Venezuela, if that's the country that I'm thinking of, they wanted it for themselves. But then Spain wants it because, well, Venezuela wanted it because it was off their shores and their territorial waters. But then Spain wants it because that was their ship, that was their gold. Now Spain's claiming it, but also some of the native peoples of the area. I think some of that gold and came from the Incas and other tribes. Now they want it too because they say that was our gold. And I think someone else wants it too. Well, the treasure hunters want it. I think even the U.S. has a claim to it. So all of a sudden, all these people want that gold because it's a ton of it. So now it's in this huge legal battle as to who gets it. So you can kind of understand why, if indeed the federal government did find something here, which it's pretty obvious they did, why they would try to keep it secret, because then it creates a whole legal mess as to who does the gold belong to, especially if it's stolen gold, stolen by, was it the Knights of the Golden Circle or who those people were. Yeah, everybody's going to want it. Does it belong to the federal government? Does it belong to the state of Pennsylvania, because that's where it was? Where was it stolen from? Does it belong to those people? Who does the gold belong to? And that's the problem that it creates. So if you just pretend that you didn't find anything, I guess you can just keep the gold. But I don't think it's working out so well for them. But like I said, I don't know if that information will ever be revealed as to what exactly they found. But I think for the sake of just history and just the idea that this was found, it would be so amazing to know. But yet, they kind of have to ruin it in a way too, I guess. But if everybody wasn't so greedy about the gold, I don't know. But I guess that's impossible to have people not be greedy. All right, so yeah, that's some new information on Dents Run Gold. Interesting story. Like I was on the internet a little bit earlier today, just studying about the Knights of the Golden Circle, and there's so much treasure potentially hidden out there. For me, I'm not really interested about it for the gold. I wouldn't get to keep it anyway if I found it, but it's just the history behind it. So anyway, if you want to learn more about it, you can obviously type in Dents Run Gold. I typed in Dents Run 2022 to cut more current information about it, because I had this article, but I also looked up some other stuff today too. So interesting story. Will we ever know the truth? Who knows? Maybe in 50 years we'll find out what actually happened. But anyway, thanks for coming along, and I'll see you around.